Laziness is, Jung once said, that's the greatest passion of mankind, even greater than power and sex and anything.
Today we ignore the importance of dreams. We rarely listen to what they're saying. In fact, we've even forgotten their language. Paradoxically, throughout our religious history, dreams played a central role in determining the fate of mankind. They were thought to be the voice of God. Dr. von Franz, let's look first at some biblical dreams. A dream which changed the history of the Jewish nation, the dream of Jacob's ladder. And Jacob dreamed that there was a ladder reaching from the earth up to heaven. And the angels of the Lord were ascending and descending on it. The Lord stood above the ladder and said, "The land in which you lie I will give to you and your descendants. And by your descendants shall all the families of the earth bless themselves. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go." Quite a prediction, eh?
Jacob's dream has been one of the examples which have always been cited by medieval and later authors to justify the taking seriously of dream, and there are some more in the Bible which were always taken in the Western civilization as proof that God sends dream and that dreams have an important, even they speak of God-sent dreams. They are communications with God. Now Jacob goes to a certain place near Haran, and there, because the sun set, he lies down and he puts a stone as a pillow under his head. And that certain place is mentioned again at the end of the text, that Jacob said, this is truly the house of God, and so on. This is one of the oldest beliefs of mankind, that in the landscapes there are certain places where one has either communication with the upper deities or with the lower deities. For instance, a dark chasm or a hole in the ground is generally by every primitive tribe looked at as to be the entrance to the underworld, where one communicates with the gods below, where the dead disappear into, or the souls of the children come up, and so on. And then other places, in general, especially mountaintops, are places where there is a special communication with the gods above. If you think of Moses on Sinai, for instance, and so on, because on the mountaintops you are closer, so to speak, to the upper gods. That's why Zeus lives on Mount Olympus in Greece, and all the gods live on high mountains, or goddesses. And in a flat country where they have no mountains, it can also be some other special place. Now Jacob didn't know that this place was a sacred place. He concluded it from his dream. He said, that must be a sacred place I have been, because it has come to me. That touches a mystery which we haven't yet solved. Namely, we project our soul into a landscape. If there is a whole soul geography in the world. Every nation and every civilization has a geography. They have generally a place where one communicates with the gods above, a place where one communicates with the god below, a place where there are good spirits, a place where there are evil earthly spirits, and so on. It is as if in original man, his unconscious psyche were spread all over the landscape. In certain places in the landscape, you have a shudder and you have certain experiences. The Romans still knew that. They called that the genius lousie, the spirit of the place. And when, for instance, they built a house or they made a garden, then they always put a little statue or phallic symbol up to the spirit of the place. May the spirit of the place be benevolent to me. And if you, with an open heart, still go through a landscape, you will notice that there are places you feel good, and you would like to stay, and there are other places you feel somehow uncanny. You don't know why, but you don't want to stay there. You have the same in a house. You see even that your house, domestic animals, have favorite places where they lie and others where they won't go for anything, even if you think they are suitable. One can rationalize it and say it is because there is a cold draft or something like that, but it isn't always. Sometimes one can't find out what the reason is. They just feel psychically good in some places, and we are just the same. We have our favorite corners, and we are angry if somebody else sits there where we want to sit. We are exactly like dogs. But in the landscape, the tribes have the same thing, and so Jacob hit there on a sacred place where his, now talking psychologically, his soul could open to a divine influence through a dream. And he put a stone under his head, and that stone is one again of the oldest symbols of mankind, of something sacred. In all most original tribes we still know exist on Earth, and also from all the archaic excavation, and even Neanderthal man and so on probably worshipped stones. Certain stones were felt to contain some sacred powers. And for instance, for the Australian Aborigine, in certain stones the spirit of the ancestor god lives, and if a woman passes those stones, she can conceive a child. The child comes into her womb from those stones. And the same was true. The Germans, old Germans thought that. They thought that the souls of newborn children came out of tombstones on the graves of their ancestors. The ancestors were jumped into the women from there. So the stone is a place of the origin of human life. The sacred is again the eternal man. The stone is something very similar than the star. It has to do with the eternal, everlasting substance of the human being. That was projected into the stone. So with this sacred stone, which is a primitive thing under his head, a kind of fetish, which makes him capable of connecting with the beyond, Jacob goes asleep and the sun sets. The setting of the sun could be interpreted as the blotting out of consciousness. He goes deep in the unconscious, he goes asleep. And in that moment he sees a ladder going up to the sky. Now this famous Jacob's ladder, on which angels go up and down, is the motif of a continuous connection with the realm of the gods. For instance, in the shamans and the medicine men of most countries, in their initiation, they climb a tree, or they climb a ladder, or they climb on a rope up into what they say the sky. It's naturally only a few meters what they do in reality, and with the idea of going up into the ghost world and into the world of the gods and having the connection. And for instance, the medicine men in Tibet and China of old were called the master of the cord, because only they had that connection. They could climb up to the sky. And in other places it is a tree or a ladder. Simply one of the means to go up step by step and have a connection with the divine world. But later, in the Renaissance and in 17th century, Jacob's ladder was interpreted as being the sounds and vowels, or to be the different qualities of the world, or the different numbers of the world. There were all systems which projected into that ladder as being, but the basic idea is a continuous, constant connection with the powers of the unconscious, the divine powers of the unconscious. You could say the dream itself is such a ladder. It connects us with the depth of our psyche, with the unknown depth of our psyche. Every dream is a rung on a ladder, so to speak. And the angels are the messengers of God, so he can receive messages, and there the Lord predicts him the future. that belongs to the historical situation that dreams were mostly attended as means to predict the future or to know the future. And there the Lord predicts Jacob that he and his descendants will spread over the earth and the Lord will be with them. He receives a confirmation that God is with him. And that gives him the courage to go on. And that's why when he wakes up, he calls this place the house of the Lord, Beit El, and puts a stone there as a mark. The stones have always been marker of sacred place. That's an age-old habit of mankind, and goes on from there.
When you use the word God, what do you mean psychologically?
Psychologically, I'm using the words anything which impresses a human being as completely overwhelming, so that the genuine reaction one has is to prostrate oneself to the floor, to venerate it, to fear it. It's what is fascinating, frightening, or positively overwhelming in a sort of blissful rapture. Anything which you can say, what sweeps a human being completely from its feet, that is always been called God.
Are you using the word gods in the same way?
In the same way, yes. Only it means that in polytheistic religions they characterize different ways of being overwhelmed. Overwhelmed by terror, then it is, for instance, Shiva the destroyer, or overwhelmed by bliss, then you are overwhelmed rather by Vishnu or so on. But in all polytheistic religions there are always assurances that really all those many gods are one. And when you have a monotheistic religion, like in Christianity, they are secretly more. For instance, we have Trinity and saints and angels. There's always a secret polytheistic. So monotheism and polytheism always interpenetrate each other. Sometimes the accent is more on the one, and sometimes the accent is more on the many who are one.
Are the gods alive and well in suburbia?
The gods are. The gods are nowadays everywhere where one doesn't expect them, and mostly in the desert. They are, for instance, in the bottle of alcohol, or in the LSD, or in some other addiction. Or the Wotan, the god of rage, is, for instance, in terrorists. A terrorist, generally, if you analyze him, is just dedicated to an overwhelming rage. And the rage has him, he has not the rage has him. So that is his God. So we have an innumerable amount of gods, but because we don't venerate them and we don't look at them, they are mostly nasty. That's why, for instance, if somebody has his God in a brandy bottle, you have to find for him a relationship to a spiritual God. You have to drive out the negative spirit by a positive spirit.
In Jacob's dream, angels bring in messages from God. Obviously, people back then believed in angels. But what aspect of the psyche do they represent? Are angels still alive today, or did they all die?
Well, I can tell what happened to me and my friend Miss Hannah. We were driving into town, and suddenly she stepped on the brakes so that I flew into the window. And I looked around. There was nothing around. At that moment, a child behind a car made itself loose and ran right in front of our car, but we had already stopped. And I said to Miss Hannah, how on earth did you do that? The child wasn't visible when you stopped. It wasn't yet visible at all. And she said, something in me told me, brake at once, brake at once. I don't know what that was. Now, historical man would have said, an angel told me that. My protecting angel told me that. It is sometimes as if a benevolent presence interferes with what we are doing. Miss Hannah had no idea why she braked. She just felt like a voice in her ear saying, brake, brake, and she braked. Now, people sometimes fall down from a roof and get caught up by a tree branch, or they have a bad car accident where theoretically they should be dead and they are practically unhurt. And that makes them feel that there was some intentional, meaningful agency at work which helped them or saved their lives, a presence, and that it is not just a mechanism because that thing does it intelligently. That's why one feels it's like a personality helping one, something personal, something protecting or personal. We have also naturally evil angels which can lead us down the road of destruction. But generally, the idea of angels comes from such experience, miraculous experiences where one feels that some intelligent agency beyond us has helped us. Now, one feels a present. The angel has also sometimes to do with the idea of a double. Most primitive people in primitive civilizations believe that we have somewhere living in the bush or also invisibly accompanying us behind us a greater personality, an invisible double. Now, we would say that's a personification of the unconscious, of the maker of dreams. And if one sees that double actually in reality outside, then it is generally a symptom of death, primitives say, because they think that we are, as long as we live on earth, split. We have a consciousness, a restricted consciousness, which is the thing we would now call our ego consciousness, and we have a greater personality, invisible personality, which lives behind us or somewhere in the bush, and which so only appears at certain moments. And if a primitive is saved in such a miraculous way from an accident, he would think that his double has done it. So the double and the angel protecting angel have a lot to do with each other. It's always the same experience that something more intelligent and greater than your ego is alive in you, and sometimes makes you do things or arranges your fate against your own will and against your own planning. And that is an experience I think everybody has had in his life sometimes. And naturally in higher religions that was then transformed into the teaching that there are angels and that everybody has a good angel protecting him, and sometimes also an evil angel trying to seduce him or her. It is the battle of powers, half personified powers in the unconscious within us, for which we are not responsible and which were understood as messengers with God. The angels have the function. Primitive man thought that God has not the possibility of looking after everything himself, so the angels are his delegates who look after his creatures.
Many medieval paintings often show angels as messengers of dreams. They show the dreamer and then the angel bringing the dream down from heaven.
Yes, the dream was very often understood as being, so to speak, the angel was understood as being the personified essence of a dream, because you see, dreams also save our lives. Sometimes we have a warning dream, and if we attend to it, we can avoid all sorts of disaster. I, for instance, would never take a flight if I had a disastrous dream the night before, because I think if the unconscious takes the trouble to give me a warning dream, I should attend to it. Our unconscious, and we cannot explain that, but it is a fact that it does know more than we know. That it is as if the unconscious of the human being is expanded into outer nature and has informations which we cannot have. And therefore in dreams you get sometimes warnings or informations about things you cannot possibly know.
In Jacob's dream, an inner authority gives him direction for the rest of his life. We talked earlier about how that inner authority can be projected out onto an individual or a great personality. Can it also be projected onto a cause or an ideology?
Yes, you can either project on a personality of a spiritual or worldly leader, or it can be an ideology, an ism, or a religious conviction, which you also then look at to be the highest goal and dictating important factor of your life. That is just as possible. That's why wherever you have fanatical beliefs, be it in religion or an ideological system, you have this projected